Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the New School HR podcast. It's been a while and we're ready to crack on with Season 2. Before we begin, I'm going to put a little bit of a disclaimer out there. So, Season 2 is a bit more in-depth, is a bit more about topics, if you like, that we in HR will have to deal with. And the piece I have to say is that what I'm sharing with you is my approach to these subjects, and it's going to be based on the experience I have. So policies, ways of working, etc. will be different in all companies. So you have to bear this in mind. For me, I've stuck to the same sort of HR roles. So the changes are there. There have been changes in policies, the way that things have happened, but I'm obviously operating at a level where I'm able to draw on my experience and incorporate my own thought processes, my own experience and stuff into what I say. So when I say this is my advice. I want to make that very clear. I think anything you hear, always make sure that you check it back to your own policies to see if it's relevant. Some of the stuff will be how I approach things as a person, and obviously that you can factor in. But if you're ever in doubt, just make sure you check in and make sure that whatever you hear from this podcast is relevant to what you're doing. At this moment in time, I'm not advising people to go and rewrite policies or anything like that. Not at all. This is purely just my take on these topics. So, for example, absence, I know there's a wealth of different ways of doing it. And I can see that through the different HR teams I've worked with and their experiences and how they've done things. I have a very good awareness of the fact that I haven't used some of the different methods that are out there. So sit back, enjoy, ask questions if you have any. But Season 2 is ready to go. This is going to be the disclaimer for Season 2, so that's why I've gone on a bit. I'll reference that in the later podcast as well for this season. So enjoy, ask questions. Hopefully this drives a bit of engagement for the podcast. I think if people listen to it and they don't agree with something or they have a better way of doing it, please feel free to share. But for the time being, this is episode 01 of Season 2, and this one is around absence. So, today's episode is sponsored by a small Happy Meal McDonald's cola. I actually drank my medium. My son doesn't drink anything other than water. So this is my wife's, which is now mine. But there you go, that's the real world, right? So anyway, absence. I've changed the format a bit from Season 1. I think I've learned a couple of things. Me reading out the whole list of everything is unnecessary because it's in the title notes. I'm looking to improve things as well. So at the time of recording, it is the 19th of January. I don't know when it's going to be published because I want to sort formatting and stuff out. But anyway, let's jump in. So first thing is, what is an absence? So my interpretation is a period of time away from the business. That's simply it. It's an absence, yeah? And I think, traditionally we look at absence as sickness absence, and that's what you'll see mainly in the front of policies. But I want to explain that for me, personally, there's 3 types of absences. So you've got your sickness absence, your authorized paid absence, and your authorized unpaid. And I guess caveat to that is unauthorized absence, which is AWOL. So I always try and explain this to my managers that I work with. Those are the different categories for me, and that's how I get them to divide their... I'm sidetracked by my mobile. But that's how I get them to think about it, because if you don't section it off and you treat everything as a sickness absence, that's not entirely correct. And I think where the ball gets dropped on absences is we just stick to a policy. We stick to the black and white. And I feel like that's the wrong thing to do. I think absence, you have the black and white policy there as a tool to aid you if you need it. But actually, if you're managing absence in a mature adult way, you'll bring your absence levels down. So that's my view on it. Some other forms of absence to mention, You got emergency absences, so that's like, your boiler breaks down and you need to take a day off because the gas engineer is coming. Dependency leave, which is time off for someone who depends on you. Is this just kids? I think sometimes we have people that depend on us that aren't under 18. Bereavement leave, which, in many organizations is a touchy subject. I've worked in 3 organizations and there's been 3 different sets of rules. And the other one that I think, I've heard it referred to as modern, but I don't think it is things like sabbatical stroke career breaks. So those are some other ones that I have worked with and I think are quite useful to have an awareness of. I guess just to cover off, sabbatical would be a break for a period of time, traditionally under 12 months, and then anything over 12 months is a career break, which, if somebody's having more than 12 months, you'll go through that process. The other one to talk about is holidays. For me, holiday is annual leave. That's an entitlement. That's a break. That's not an absence. I'm also one of those strong believers that holidays should not be used to cover sickness or authorized absences. I guess for me, the difference is anything that's not a holiday, I would expect a return to work being done. And the reason being is that you're recording that absence and what it's for. It gives a track record for somebody to look back on. My pet peeve, and one that I'm very passionate about, is lateness is not an absence. Lateness to me is a conduct issue. I'm not going to get animated about it. So, managed absences. So, look, for me, all absences should be managed, and I've referenced that in the return to work process. No, I haven't, because that's later on. I've mentioned that when I talked about return to works. That is a form of managing an absence. I just want to make that clear. So, sickness absence. So, you got your short-term sicknesses, which is usually going to be anything under 20 days. These are, varied reasons. Okay, let's keep it real. Varied reasons, and I think the thing to be mindful of is what has happened leading up to the absence. I always try and say to my managers, have you done anything to piss them off? Has anything happened? Have you heard of anything on the shop floor, etc., that would cause it? Most of the common types of short-term absence is around minor illnesses, which is very flaky as an excuse at best. You do have mental health issues there, so you get people who will be off for maybe a week, 2 weeks, under 20 days for mental health reasons. And I think the thing I want to highlight there is you've got to be very conscious of if they've had mental health illnesses. Do they have a history of it? You might not necessarily know that, but that is something to definitely think about. One of the conversations I have with many of my managers is that we need to treat it as, I don't force them to treat it as a disability, but I do ask them to think back over the time that the person's been employed. And, if they've had absences of mental health for periods of time dating back, anything over a year could be classed as a disability. And I have seen it where we've had people that have had mental health, issues or concerns arise, and we didn't think anything of it. And then we've got the report and it's actually come back from Occupational Health to say that they do have mental health issues. So do jump on it from the earliest opportunity and use the EAP providers if you have them, employee assistance programs. Anything over 7 calendar days, you will need a medical certificate for. Now, anything under is self-certificate. Now, a lot of the return to work forms will probably have the self-certificate form attached, but just be mindful of it, that you do need them to sign to self-certify their absence. If they do have a medical certificate, you obviously have a rough idea of how long they're going to be. I'll be honest, in my time now, I don't see many medical certificates for 4 weeks, above 4 weeks. If I go back to literally my time as a HR advisor a couple of years ago, we used to get medical certificates for a lot longer, which made absence management for long-term sick a lot easier. You'll get things for medical appointments. So there is traditionally is making up your time or authorize unpaid, or I know in some instances companies allow employees to take it from their sickness entitlement so they don't lose out on pay. Long-term sick. Actually, I'm going to cover that on the next page, but long-term sick is anything that's over 20 days. And, on average, as a statistic, I've read that the average absence per employee is 6.9 days per year. I'm going to guess that's going to be skewed now by COVID-19, but this is obviously pre that. The next type of absence to talk about is the AWOL, unauthorized absence. So AWOL is when someone just decides they're not coming in. Now, I always try to explain to people that you've got to be very careful about this. So I've had some very unfortunate instances of this. So for example, the last company I worked for, we had a regional type role person just go missing. They were a new starter. Their end of probation review was due and they literally went missing that day. And I remember speaking to his line manager and he was like, he's just fucked off. Where is he? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, we don't know. That person never made contact with us. And we obviously follow the AWOL process. So AWOL will usually have 3 stages. It will be a letter sent out to say we're concerned, be an invite to an investigation or disciplinary, then it will lead to a dismissal. So we followed that process, had no replies, and they left. We did try calling the next of kin. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people miss, if they've got next of kin details, exploit that. Anyway, a couple of months later, well, I guess the bit I didn't mention was he had company property. So the company car, company phone, etc. And literally maybe, I want to say 6-8 weeks after we dismissed him. Now, we'd written to him to get the car back and stuff, threatening the police action and all that. And then we actually got a call from a local police station. I don't know how far Newcastle is from London, but yeah, that whatever that distance is. And the company car was actually there. And they actually looked at, they tracked the car. So they tracked it on the M1 or the A1, I can't remember now. And basically what happened was this individual had the car stolen, and they actually found his company mobile phone left in the woods in Watford from London. Now, we don't actually know what happened to that guy. We was told we would get the company phone back. We never did. And yeah, the car got returned to us and it was full of drugs, like literally McDonald's and cocaine. It was crazy. I couldn't believe the police would just leave it with us like that. Didn't even clean it. But anyway, that's what happened. So fuck knows what happens to that guy. But the reality is, if something unfortunate happened to that guy, how would we feel? So, you have to be mindful of these things, that we don't always 100% know what happens with people when they go AWOL. The other thing is lateness. Some people use that as unauthorized absence. Now, for me, unauthorized absence is also if you haven't followed the absence reporting procedures. So, for example, if it says to call in and you decide to text, that's unauthorized. I don't care if you're telling me how long. Not calling on time, unauthorized. That's just me anyway. Just to rewind back, actually, I didn't touch on making contact. So for me, I would expect contact to be made every single day until there's a medical certificate. And once you get that, obviously, then you'll revert to calling nearer the time, etc., of when those certificates are due to expire. Next one to talk about is authorized absence. I don't hear this term, to be honest. I don't hear it at all. The reason I say authorized absence is because I think our managers have very short memories. So telling someone they can have the day off for whatever reason, that's on you as a manager, or on the manager, right? That is on them. And if they say they're going to pay it, that's also on them. And if they put it in an email or a text or whatever, that's on them. Now, I treat this as an absence, and I prefer to have it factored into a return to work so we can look at trends and things like that. And a lot of managers hate me saying that. But what I then hate is when they call me and say, this person's been taking the piss because they've had X amount of days off, authorized and paid, and they're just not happy about it. Well, for me, if you've approved it, that's kind of your business, isn't it? Like, don't be trying to use that afterwards. And so, for me, any authorized absence is unpaid. I don't agree with paying it. Now, I know in circumstances you're going to make exceptions. As HR, fuck it, maybe people have made exceptions for us. And I guess things are changing now that we can work from home too. But remember precedence. You're setting a precedence every time you do something that is against policy. And then there's going to be times when you're going to want to hold someone else to it. For me, that's not fair. That's not the right thing to do. So I always ask people to be mindful of that. Right, usually I get distracted. That's one of the things probably of this podcast. Not that I'm a gambler, let's put it out there. I'm not a gambler, but I've actually put a cheeky bet on the football tonight, and my £1 has turned into £25. And the main winning is like 1,000. Now, obviously, I'm probably not going to be winning 1,000, but do I cash out? I mean, actually, it was £1. No, it was 150. So I've, done quite well. I actually won 30 quid last night as well. Sounds like I have a problem, I don't. Anyway, so next topic, long-term sick. So look, what is a long-term sickness? So we covered that. It's anything over 20 days or more. Now, different companies have different methods of what they do after that 20 days. But really and truly, the welfare visit should be the first well, again, welfare visits are labeled differently in different companies, aren't they? So I won't say welfare visits take place. What I would say is that meetings or discussions should definitely take place, because at this point you want to have some sort of scale of how this person is doing. And I think we really miss a trick by not doing this. So in the last week, we've eliminated 2 long-term... I say eliminated, that sounds fucked up, innit? No, we've actually stopped 2 long-term sicks, which were going for about 2 months now, or at the time, rather, they're back now, going for 2 months, simply by picking up the phone and saying, what's your concerns? And we've made adjustments, and, well, for one, and the other one's just coming back. So, for me, if you're going to have an agency replacing or something like that, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more than some of the solutions that we can put in place to make people return to work. So, and the other thing is, if it's around mental health or something more specific, then we do have EAP providers where I have worked, so we can offer those kind of things. But let's explore what we can do. So look, I was told a statistic, which I don't know if it's true anymore. That's the actual truth. But a statistic was that the average long-term sick is anywhere between 12 and 15 months. In my experience, up until very recently, that has been the case. But as I said previously, what makes it really difficult is we don't get the medical certificates for that period of time. Now, some companies have what is called group income protection, which I don't really know what that means. All I know is that there's some kind of payment paid to people who are off sick. I've never had any real experience of it, and I just know it's a thing. And there's a criteria, and there's an assessment, etc., that takes place to actually validate whether or not that person should be getting it. So for me, if somebody is getting it, then it would normally suggest that they are ill. I think there's a stigma around long-term sick. I think people think it's a joke or people are taking the piss. I don't have that belief. I think all of the long-term sicks I've had since my early HR days that I've been involved in have all wanted to work, or at least displayed a desire to work and not really put up any barriers about coming to work. They just haven't been signed back because of whatever their condition is. So one of the things to take note of is how long is the company sick pay? This is very important. So I've worked in places where company sick pay is 6 months. I've worked in places where company sick pay is 2 weeks. So you got very different scales. Now, for me, if somebody's off sick and they're only entitled to like 4 weeks or 6 weeks sick pay, probably genuine. Maybe I'm a optimist, but I don't see many. Like I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we have so many long-term sick." I've never experienced that. Like, so for me, the ones that I've had have in my opinion, always been genuine. So yeah, I think you need to bear that in mind. Now, I have come across, actually in the HR team, an individual who every year around about the same time, and this was a company that had 6 months entitlement, would be long-term sick for the for the full payment allowance every year without fail. I don't know why no one ever picked up the trend. As soon as I got the opportunity to do so, I did. I asked a question, and I got told the answer, and that didn't happen anymore. But anyway, if you see a trend, we can ask the question. I think that's the thing. I think that's where we really go and miss. A lot of people just refuse to ask the question, to say, what is it? What is the trend? What is the rationale? What is it you need? And that's where we really miss a massive opportunity a lot of the time. So, yeah. So, common causes for long-term sick. In my experience, it's usually, am I allowed to say the family favorites? Fuck it, we're going to say musculoskeletal injuries, mental health injuries, mental health issues or concerns. That's the two really that I've come across. Nothing really more acute than that, apart from I did have an individual who had MS, and he wasn't actually off sick for the duration of the time that he was sick, if that makes sense, whilst he was ill. But what's happened there? Yeah, he wasn't. Okay, I got massively distracted by something that I just read. So anyway, yeah, so I was talking about the guy with MS. So he was actually within the workplace for a long time before he subsequently went sick, and he had an extreme desire to be in work, and I'll cover it when we talk about reasonable adjustments. But in the end, yes, eventually we did get to a place where it was agreed that being in work was not the right thing for him. But it took a lot of adjustments, and we had to have an honest conversation with ourselves to look at the size of the business and what kind of activity we would be able to present to him. And we was actually able to find him work to do that was considered full time. But in this instance, the individual actually used to travel, commute by bicycle, and continued to do so for the whole of his time. He was given he did get given a support mechanism where he could get transport, but chose not to. So it's very hard to then say to someone that you can't be in work, etc., etc. So just be mindful of these things. So how does it start? So we have the initial meetings. Like I said, if you have the meetings, you probably can look at what you can do to aid someone return to work, whether that's a phased return, which is a reduction of hours or whatnot. But if it's going to be something that you think is a bit more acute, then in the first instance, I would always ask the question of what support are you receiving currently? I'd do that with any absence anyway, if there's a link condition as well. What support are you receiving? What is the advice? What therapy, etc.? I would then start looking at things like the initial meetings. Now, I don't jump straight into a welfare meeting. I think we have to look at people's level of service, we have to look at the condition, and we have to look at actually, is it something that we can not support, but is it something that we are able to, cover, if you like, whether that's through overtime, whether that's through agency. So I always try and have conversations with people to get an idea of what they think it is and what the doctors are saying. I would then ask for a GP letter, just to get an overview. Now, if the GP letter is good and it tells me, this is what we're doing in terms of therapy, this is what the forecasted return date is. And I guess, listen, guys, it's about the questions you ask as well. If you ask shit questions, you're going to get shit answers. So making sure that you tailor that for what it is you need, and asking if there's any adjustments that can be made to facilitate the return to work. I do all of that as a sort of standard. Now, after that, I would be looking at what information is there, and I would be then having the welfare meeting to review what has come back. And at this point, I'll be having honest conversations with them. So if it's looking like it's saying that, this is not a condition that can be cured within a reasonable time, and I'll be talking with my business leaders as well to say, is it something we can accommodate? If it doesn't look like we can, we need to start putting that message in. I've been to house visits where the manager has been like, yeah, don't worry, we'll find you a job, we'll find you this, everything's going to be okay. And it's not. So there's no point lying to someone. At that point, if I think we needed further information or, it's telling us it's not looking good, I would then get occupational health involved. And I would ensure that, we're asking questions to get answers. Again, and I think it is about the transparency at that point with the individual. I think for me, where long-term sick goes amiss is we need to be thinking about the return to work. I always plan for the return to work. So then that way, you're also leaving yourself less exposed to potentially a claim, if you like, because you're demonstrating the right behaviors, you're demonstrating support for the employee, and actually you're getting people in the mindset as well. So your stakeholders, they need to be in the mindset that this person could return to work. And I think it's really disgusting, actually, that most of the time the stakeholders will be like, I just want to fuck them off. And we as HR just jump along with that. And I don't think that's the right message. We need to think about the message it sends to their wider employees as well and how they take it. Reasonable adjustments. So I recently took on a case, and it was a bit of an acute condition. I don't actually know I do know what the term is, I'm just not going to share. But it's an acute condition, and this individual actually reduced their hours because of their condition. And actually, to be in work, all they needed was a chair that was suitable. So that was it. And you think about it, they reduced their hours. They did that 3 or 4 years ago. Think about the money that they've lost, the potential earnings, and to get the occupational health review, to get the correct chair, and get the chair, cost approximately, we'll say, I don't know, $750. That's significantly less than what that individual has lost by going to reduced hours over 4 years, if you had to pay it back. There's been disputes about how many chairs were ordered, etc. But look, in the first instance, why don't we just get an occupational health review? That would be my argument. It's none of the current people around at the time when I took the case on that had it right at the beginning. But, to me, I'm surprised that we allowed this to happen for so long. And actually, he was able to work from home actually during the pandemic. He was able to do full-time hours. And now we have him in the workplace, albeit on a phased return, but he's there. So it's about trying to get people back. There's no point calling everyone a wanker or a cunt or whatever. It's not the right behavior. These people, whether you like it or not, they've been around, they've done a job. There was a time when, we valued them. Why do they just drop value because they're not well? I don't like it, as you can tell. I think with the mental health situation, a lot of people are a bit nervy around it. Now, for me, I've had an experience with someone who was, deemed mental health issue. but actually they were going through the menopause, and they were having an extreme reaction to medication. And the husband was really desperate to resolve the situation, and we'd done house visits and stuff like that. And we sent them through to our EAP in the end. So Occupational Health didn't really fucking do anything, but the EAP providers did. And they actually said, yes. They did their own assessment of her, so we were part of an industry. We had a specialist EAP that was specific for the industry, and they were brilliant. And they actually sent her to their own doctors and whatever. And they actually found out, yes, it was the medication. And they changed the medication, and literally that woman came back to work in about 5 weeks. So, this person had been off for 18 months, I think it was. I can't remember the exact start date. Came back to work, even increased the hours that she was working. So, this is my point. We write people off, but it's about how we can facilitate. I think the other stigma around mental health is that we have to be lenient. So, look, my approach is very simple. I will ask you the questions, and I'll ask you to give me the information for us to enable us to support you. But if you're not going to share the information, and you're not going to do the things that are suggested to you by the professionals, then for me, that's on you. And that sounds really harsh, but, at the end of the day, I do have this opinion that we're adults. I get it that there are some people who might have problems with some of the suggestions and stuff, but if the help is being offered and you choose to turn it down for whatever reason, then I'm not sure what we can do. And then that leads me on to the hard part, which is the termination of a long-term sick. I've done this, I think, 3 or 4 times actually in my career. If I'm honest with you, I've seen resignations on the back of ill health, which we've accepted. But the actual exits, I've only done a few. And they're not easy, I always try to... it sounds bad, strike a deal. I always try to do the right thing by the individual. So things like paying up their notice pay and stuff like that. A lot of people don't, which shocked me. I don't know how you can expect somebody who can't work to not put in a claim against you if you just terminate their contract. So I always look at what facility we can support. So, for example, I would pay them till the end of the month they're in, and I'd pay them the notice period. That's just me as an individual. I do see people go down the settlement route. I'm against that. I got pushed into doing that once. And the worst part is I actually negotiated an exit with the guy. It wasn't even one of my cases. And I was pushed into a settlement agreement, which to this day I don't agree with, because the individual agreed to what I would say was a reasonable agreement. But instead, this person ended up leaving with a stupid amount of money because of the tax-free side. But yeah, that's my piece. That's the only time I've ever given some sort of payment. But yeah, generally, the exits have been smooth because we've been reasonable. We've been transparent throughout the whole time. People generally just, they get it. They understand it. And, some people, I think the other thing is, I hear this thing of there are people who would actually just take an exit because of benefit reasons, etc. I don't fully understand it. I'm not going to lie. But if you have the conversations right and people are in that space, you'll soon find out. And, I would always be exploring that. So if we're having difficult conversations with someone to say, look, this is where we are, this is where we forecast it to be, I would always explain to them that, if they want to discuss options with us, we can do that. But I won't present what the options are until they request that conversation. So to give you an update, my 30 quid has turned to 7 quid. Which is still a £5 profit, right? But anyway, Chelsea have fucked me. That makes sense though, innit? Anyway, so, managing absence. So, look, I'm not going to go into War and Peace. I'm very conscious that I'm giving away a lot of hints and tips here. But I do want to cover this because I think this is where we really drop the balls. I've mentioned that a couple of times throughout the podcast. My wife has said I need to stop repeating myself, but I have just done that again. So the first thing is we need to actually understand the reason for the absence. I think a lot of times we just take it as, it's one day off sick, they got a stomach bug, and that's it. We just kind of move on and forget about it. It only becomes an issue when the person goes off sick again, sort of thing. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to fully understand it. I think we have a duty of care to the individual. I think we have a duty of care to the teammates as well that the person works with. And I think it's about demonstrating as a line manager and as a HR team as well that, this isn't just about us and the business. It's about the welfare of the individual. Reasonable adjustments. I don't understand why we just laugh at it. The retail company I worked for was very good at this front. But I guess that was the size of the organization as well. So I can understand that you had a lot more scope. But these are things you really need to consider. Because what I try to say to managers is, look at the size of the business. Don't just look at the size of your one team. Sometimes look at the size of the team in the whole building. Sometimes I've been in places where we have up to 400 people, but we're saying that we can't find an alternative role for someone. That's nonsense, bro. That's complete fucking nonsense. And as an outsider looking in, they're not going to look at it as, oh, well, Bob only has a team of 7. They're going to look at it as, there's a building with 700 roles or 400 roles in there. That is what someone will be looking at. And I don't think we support our managers enough when it comes to this kind of stuff. I think we just kind of say, yeah, there's no alternative solution. That's wrong. You could be having administration work that can take a whole day's worth of work if you combine the whole place. And I get it, there's a training need and stuff as well sometimes. But if there is, and it's something you could do easily, why are we not supporting people? I think, there's things about different working patterns. I get it operationally that can be difficult if you have limited numbers. But again, you might have someone who is on a flexible contract. Are they not able to cover it? Because that's the whole idea of a flexible contract. So I just think we need to be more open to things. Equipment as well. If I, go back to the earlier example about the chair, it's definitely going to cost us more if we end up in a tribunal to defend ourselves and to pay off a claim, because I don't see how it doesn't go to one, than it would have been to just get the fucking chair in the first place. And I get it, there's pieces around the chair being the right one, etc. But why did they not just resolve it? Why did they not just do the investigation? Like, why would you save the $250 on the occupational health thing? It's madness at times. People just don't think, bro. That's what it is. People just don't think. The one thing I always try to look at as well is if we have a link condition or if we have something that seems to happen in a pattern. So I know we think that all patterns of illness are fraudulent. Yeah, that's the general perception. If there's a trend, it's fraudulent. Someone is trying to fuck us. But sometimes those minor illnesses can turn out to be real problems. So I have seen examples of it where we've had somebody who's had a cough and it's led to be a more serious chest condition. And, at the time you're looking at is one cough. And I'll be honest, I do say to people, go to a GP. Find out what it is. Find out what is wrong with you. Like, don't just leave shit. And I expect as HR we should be doing that. We should be having a much bigger understanding of what we think could happen. Another time we had somebody who had like migraines almost, but they didn't describe it like that. And they kept on having it, and they said it was an issue with the screen initially. So we did things like get the screen protectors and all that. Even then, there was a fucking hesitance by that. Let's just be clear on it. That wasn't fucking easy either to get the 32 quid approved. But we did that kind of stuff. But it still happened. And they were taking this person down a disciplinary route. And I just asked the HR advisor, I said, hold on a minute, if this is something that's serious, have we asked them to go to a GP or anything? Yeah, they've gone to a GP, right. Have they pushed it further? Have they said that it's affecting their job? So the individual did. And it then transpired that, this is very extreme, but this is what happened. It turned out she had some sort of, I don't want to say tumor, but something was growing in her head. And they had to operate on it. It's quite serious. And, this person had been absent. And I get it, okay, she has family, etc. Maybe they could have said something. But we just called her an idiot and didn't bother. Up until the point where, I got involved and said, hold on a minute, do you not see a pattern here? So I think it's a duty of care thing, and I think as HR we should be doing the right thing there. The other thing I want to talk about is ensuring that, we get the doctor's evidence that we need. I think that's the other thing. We don't collect anything. So if they have a meeting or an appointment or whatever, why are we not collecting it? Or they've told us about it, so let's have the thing on file. Because I think sometimes what I find frustrating is when I take new areas of departments or whatever, new businesses, and you don't find anything, but you get told, everyone tells you all the problems, but there's nothing there. So I always ask us to do that. And that also creates a very clear understanding with the employee as well, because they start to think, okay, actually, I'm going to be asked a question here. I'm going to have to provide something. Follow the absence process. Do the formal meetings, where you have to. But if there isn't going to be a sanction, personally, why the fuck are we inviting them to a disciplinary? I've actually just come on the back of an email exchange about this. Let's not be punitive about this. If we're trying to be supportive and we're trying to be in the I don't know what century we're in, actually, that's really bad. But 2021, let's be supportive. Let's not patronize everyone. Let's not be punitive. We're not trying to run a dictatorship here. This is about people being open and transparent. If you want to build that relationship between a manager, these are personal issues. You don't want to get disciplined if you've got a health concern, and people are aware about it. That's nonsense. If you're not going to give me a sanction, why are you putting me through it? It's a waste of everyone's fucking time. And then I'll appeal it, and then it'll just end up in the square one anyway. So let's just think about it pragmatically. I think the other thing, one of the unfortunate things actually that I have come across is when people lie. So this is gonna sound really bad, but this is a true story. So I had an individual who kept on taking authorized unpaid, and they built up a really big collection. And actually, they said it was because their mother was having treatment for cancer. So alarm bells started to ring. So the first question was, okay, but why are you taking the whole day off? Because I was informed that they had a support network, etc. And they couldn't answer that. I then said, okay, we'll allow you the time to go, unpaid, but we would require some sort of appointment letter or confirmation. As soon as that happened, no absences since then. None. Didn't hear about the mother having cancer ever again. So this is that point that I come to. It's about asking the questions. I don't know why we're so scared. We're allowed to ask questions. And if somebody doesn't give you the answer, then they're not enabling us to help them. Then that's what the process is for. But whilst people are trying to do the right thing and, trying to get better, etc., then we should be supporting them. I think, look, in terms of the formal meetings, I always make sure that we cover off, each absence, what the absence was about, what the recommendation was from the doctor. If it wasn't something that went to a doctor, did they go to a doctor? Should they go to a doctor? And these are all captured in the notes. And the reason I do that is to give that emphasis on the support being there, but also that we know what they're doing, how seriously they're taking it in terms of the business impact, etc. And of course, look, I think one of the most patronizing things is asking someone, do you know what the impact was on the business? Of course they fucking know, bruv. You're acting as if like they ain't never had to cover for someone being sick. Of course they know. But as soon as you turn it into that piece, you can ask them 4 times. The answer's not going to change. And obviously, if they're heading towards the exit for absence, then again, the reason's not going to change. So I don't know. I don't personally ask that question. I ask more around what are you doing as an individual to manage it? And I think that's what we need to do. Treat people like adults. So the next thing I want to talk about is a word that I don't think anyone anyone demonstrates anymore, and that's empathy. So I think empathy is the key to managing absence, whether that's abused or whether that's taken up. And the reason being is if it gets abused, you've got it to fall back on to say that actually you as a business were trying to do the right thing. But if it's taken up, the respect that you get as a business and the buy-in you get and the PR that you get is really good. I know that was a bit of an anticlimax, but it is about that. People will look at that. I've seen many examples in my previous workplace where we've done the empathy thing. I gave you the example of the lady, and her team really looked up to the manager after that and really bought into us as a business, because they actually recognized that in terms of what happened, we went potentially above and beyond, and we did what was perceived to be the right thing. So I think the empathy needs to be genuine. And I think that's the hardest part, is getting the manager to understand that, they need to be genuine. They can't have the attitude of, oh, they're just taking a fucking piss or whatever. It's not about that. It's about being genuine in what you're saying. And that is a difficult thing for HR to get across. And, I literally had an argument with someone, I had a discussion with someone today, and I was trying to say, the analogy I used was, it's a football game. Sickness is a football game. I say that as I'm looking at my winnings just dropping because of football. But anyway, it's a football game. So you start the game, get to the second half, you have the opportunity to change something, right? To have a better attack. And what I personally would rather do is, instead of waiting till the 90th minute to get the rationale as to why we've done something wrong, and then having to try and rescue the situation in the last minute, I would rather have that opportunity in my own hands. So yeah, the empathy piece is very important to enable that approach to happen. And being genuine also, because then people open up to you more. The more people buy into the manager or the HR person that's running their case, the easier it becomes to have difficult conversations if you have to later on. The next thing I ask my managers to do, and I do with them, or I do myself as well, is to actually work out a bit about the condition, do some research. So what is a condition? What's the symptoms? What's the medication? Are there side effects? To have an understanding, because I think the worst thing is when you go to someone's house or you're sitting with someone in a disciplinary and they mention some shit and you ain't got a fucking clue. I think that just makes us look pathetic. If we're showing a duty of care, and I think let's also be realistic here. How many people do you have absent at the moment? COVID aside. I only have 3. So is it hard for me to do this information while I'm doing my review? No, it's fucking not. So I don't know why it's frowned upon. And of that 3, they're with different managers. So we're talking about a manager taking the time to just look up one individual condition. I don't think that's unrealistic. Now, the danger is you go on Google and you find out they're going to die. Don't go on Google. I use the NHS website. Is it NHS 111 online? I use that and I put it in and I just have a quick read, and I'll share that with the manager, or I've got them into the habit now of doing their own research, because I'll give you an example with one of the ones we phoned last week. They did the NHS 111, they worked out what it was, and they've actually put the measures in place themselves, and that's what we want. As HR, that is what we want, but we have to enable them. We have to give them the guidance to get them to that place. If we're just going to sit back and say, well, the fucking book says me, then nothing's going to happen. You're just going to have the same issues, because people treat absence as something of long-term sick as a payoff because they're just going to get rid of me, or claims because they just don't manage it correctly. When the person returns to work, yes, I assume everyone returns to work. You have to bear in mind that issues can reoccur, and if you rush a phase return, you're setting yourself up to fail, is what I believe. But you have to bear in mind that there could be a reoccurrence of the incident or concern or whatever it is. So have that in mind. Don't live in a world where you think, I don't even know whose phone that is. We don't even have an Android phone in the house. It must be my son's tablet. I've put it on charge. Anyway, don't assume that it's the end of it. Okay? That is where mistakes are made. And I think, plan for it. You'll have your occupational health review, etc. They will tell you what it's like in terms of the potential of a chance of it reoccurring. So factor that in, not in terms of plan for the worst, but think about the things you can do to prevent it from happening again. How about that? Again, a lot of people just don't do it. Why? Why have such a blasé mindset? I'd rather invest the time in preventing rather than the scramble to resolve an absence concern. That's me personally. Yeah. Biggest bugbear, the sharing of information. Can we keep this shit confidential? Because that's what's supposed to happen. This is protected under GDPR. You can get in trouble for it, but what I would say is, I think people are too blasé. You'll go to a management schedule meeting and people will just be talking about long-term sick conditions, and they'll even say what HR said and how frustrated. It's all bullshit. Stop that shit. Because I've seen when these things get out and then the individual actually raises a complaint, you try and justify how you didn't do it, because it only came from one person, bro. So make sure they understand it's confidential. And they understand why and the consequences. Plus, the other thing is, if somebody's been off long-term sick, if they're returning to work, it might be difficult for them facing people anyway because of the impact that they think that they've caused on the department, the team, etc. The last thing they fucking need is somebody calling them out on the condition. That's not fair. That's not fair on anyone. So, yeah, have that in mind. If they're long-term sick, let them come in. Don't exclude them. I invite long-term sick people to Christmas parties when we're allowed them, etc., etc. Invite them, include them. You don't know what they're going through. I think everyone has this perception that they're long-term sick, they're just sitting at home doing fuck all. That's not necessarily always the case. And be mindful of that. Sometimes, especially with things like mental health concerns, etc., sometimes bringing them in a positive environment is a good thing for them. It helps people. So be mindful of that. And look, the other thing is check in frequently. Don't forget these people. I see that where I am now. They just don't fucking bother. If I don't email them to say what's going on with this person, they just don't care. And that's wrong. I think on the flip side, the previous company I worked for, they were in too much contact. There's a fine balance. I generally say as a rule of thumb, if they're off for long-term sick for a month, I would touch in every alternative week, just to see how they're doing. And I always explain to my managers that, the week leading up to their return, have the conversation, see how they're doing, see if they have any suggestions in terms of how they can return to work, because that's how we've got one of the ones back last week. Just simply by phoning them and offering them a phase return and reduced hours, different department, and they're up for it. So just be mindful of that. The more you communicate, the more you'll be able to consider what you can do. So the next part is about reasonable adjustments. I've kind of covered it throughout, but I'm conscious that I want to section this off in the description and stuff. So if I'm repeating myself, you're here because you like the sound of my voice anyway. So the first thing to factor in is remember the size of the business and the site that you're in. I cannot express how important this is. If you're a department manager in one department, speak to your colleague, man. Speak to your peer, bro. Ask them, do they have anything that needs doing? Like, I don't know why we don't do these things. If you're in a HR team and you have a shared facility or whatever, ask your peer. Have you got any vacancy gaps? Is there anything that somebody who has part-time or whatever could support with? Why do we not do that? In it, exactly my fault. So make sure you check in. Think about all the tasks in the location, in the building, yeah? And think about all the tasks that people do. So I used the example of the MS guy. He was a warehouse person, and obviously he was unable to lift or operate machinery, etc., as his condition deteriorated. And what we actually had him doing in the end was literally labeling and sticking. But what we realized is that was a full-time job if you took it away from people who were doing it ad hocly. So actually it improved efficiency because the guys that you wanted to be picking were no longer sort of doing the labeling and stuff. And that gave someone a full-time job. And when it got reduced, as his hours reduced, it wasn't that much of an impact because it was stuff that people were doing anyway. So think about the bigger picture. That's what I try and say to you guys. Don't just fucking let it slide. Think about moving their hours. So, if there's a condition that makes it difficult to commute, can we bring them in earlier or later? Is there somebody that can switch shifts with them? Think about these kind of solutions that you might have. Because if you don't, that's not really being flexible or trying to help someone, is it? And, sometimes it could literally be the difference of half an hour. Now, obviously, if the operation doesn't allow it and it causes too much of an issue, then obviously fine, you can't offer it. But if it is something, again, looking at the whole side of the business, etc., then do it. The next thing is reduced hours. So phase return. The one thing I don't like is when people do a phase return in 4 weeks. That might be what's suggested, but I think we have to think about the length of time that they've been out, the potential dauntingness, I don't know if that's a word, of returning to the workplace that you haven't been to for a number of months, etc., remembering a role, potentially learning new skills because the role has changed or whatever. So do you think a phase return is actually 4 weeks when I say that? So just be mindful of that. I've covered about the purchasing of equipment, but, I encourage people to think about it. I get it. You might be in a place where you're underperforming, etc. But if you get a disability claim and you haven't supported someone through something as simple as providing a screen, machinery or equipment, whatever, which one costs more? The most expensive thing I've seen a company do was, this sounds really bad, the same thing with the person who had MS. They actually redesigned the outbound bay. Not when I say redesign, they didn't build anything or anything like that, but what they did move the desks locations around and stuff as well. So you can do it, and I think it's always worth exploring it. We had an incident around lighting. I told you about the lady who had the operation, and the reality is it didn't cost us that much to try and help her, and maybe that helped speed up her getting a diagnosis. So think about it. And the other thing to think about is disabilities. you could end up with an equality claim. And I get it. I mean, again, I've seen one of the places I supported in my last role. They had an individual who had a really bad motorcycle accident, and he'd only been with the company for about, I think he was still even in probation. He was a really young guy, really outgoing and everything. And they actually put in ramps. And as far as I know, he's still there. And that happened in 2016. Yeah, 2016. And he was really good, and he came back, he did all his therapy, and it gave him something to aim for. And, to help a kid, an 18-year-old, get back to the workplace. And, he is, well, I'm guessing he's still in a wheelchair now, but at the time when I left, he was still in the wheelchair. And he was very grateful, and, he did nothing but good stuff in terms of praising us and all that. He's very loyal. It was a very incestuous industry where they take your people. He never did. He always remembered what the company did for him. So this is what I prefer to think about when I think of people. So we are at the last point, which has gone really quick. I have to be honest. I wasn't sure how this podcast was going to be. I was quite unsure about, how it would come across. I was thinking about my approach isn't going to be relevant for everyone, but I've actually enjoyed this one. So hopefully the next, podcasts flow easily. But anyway, so the last point I want to touch on is the return to works. So I have mentioned, for me, return to work should be in place for all absences, apart from annual leave. And the reason being is that you want to check in. And I think, again, this shows that duty of care to the individual. So, I know you might have allowed someone off for a boiler breakdown, but still I would do a return to work to acknowledge that it was an absence, and I would keep it in file, because I think where it goes amiss is we miss the trends because we don't keep anything. We just say that we did it. Probably isn't even a payroll record because you haven't even processed it on the system. So having the return to work enables us to go back. For example, if the boiler's broken down 17 times, what's really going on? That sort of thing. The only time I've really used it for almost presenting facts is I did have an individual who used to have payday Friday and Monday off for time off for dependencies, and it was around their daughter. And they used to say that, their daughter got kicked out of school, whatever. This was every month. And so it had happened, but nobody had done anything about it, and they'd left it as paid and whatever. So the first thing I did was say, right, it's actually time off for dependencies unpaid. And I did the return to work every single time. Not me personally, they did. And after some time, she actually just resigned because it got to that point. We was at a point of saying, right, okay, actually we need to do something here because you're not controlling the situation and it's having a negative impact on the business. So do you need to go part-time? No. Right, okay. What are you going to do differently then? The answer was to resign. So that's why I say it does help. Ensure all the return to work documents are signed. I can't explain how important that is. Us completing a return to work, I say us, the manager completing a return to work and signing it themselves. How do I know the individual's even seen it and agrees to it? Don't fucking know. On there you're going to be covering things like, do they get paid or not? And are they going to get a formal invite after it? If they're not signed it, I can't prove that they know about it. Think about it. So yeah, I always made sure there's signatures on there. I also have this policy which a lot of people don't like, but if there's no return to work on file, doesn't count in my world. Simple as that. And that drives the behavior. So yes, it frustrates people. I remember the last company I worked for, the first absence case I had, they told me that the individual had been off 12 times in a year. I think they said 12 or 13. So when I went on the system actually only demonstrated, I think it was something like I want to say 6, which is still high. Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. 6 is high. But when I look at the return to works, there was only one for the whole time. And so, yeah, I said to him, no, we're starting again. And that's what I would do, personally. I know that causes a lot of frustration. I do think we have to get people to a mindset of, if your absence is 1% of the department and you're that concerned over it, I think you got other issues, if I'm honest. Coming from the retail place where my absence rate was probably 5 to 6%, and it still didn't impact us. If you've got a reasonable sized team and one absence is causing you concern in a month or 2 months or whatever it is, then I think there's a bigger problem. So like, I got this case going on. The manager has 60 people, and he's got one person who's been absent 3 times in, I think it's like 7 months, and he's acting as if the world is ending. But I get it. I'm not, it's inside policy, etc. I 100% understand it. But to make out like it's destroying the world, that to me is nonsense. Don't know what people think. Don't really care. The other thing is actually record the questions and answers. So, yes, it might not have note-taking lines on the return to work that fit it, but just handwrite it even. Because it's an opportunity for you to record the questions and show the duty of care. And, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, we discussed it. But how the fuck do I know that? It's not there. And they've signed this document and you haven't put it on there. So I always ask them to do that. If it's a very long absence, I would ask for a signed fit note back to work from the GP. That's my own personal request. Now, that's not always a given. They might have to pay for it, or the GP just might say, well, actually, I haven't signed you off again. In that case, I'd go to occupational health, and I'd ensure that I'd have, if you're having those constant conversations, you know roughly when they're going to come back. So I'd ensure that it's actually done before their medical certificate expires. That makes sense, right? So yeah, that's something to consider. I always ensure that the adjustments are captured and agreed. So return to work document, they should be listed what the requirements, what the amendments are and how long they're going to be in place for, and what will be considered as the review of success. That's very important as well. I think we just put reasonable adjustments. We don't list what they are. We don't say how long for, etc. So people don't really know where they stand because, again, I don't think 4 weeks is enough. So if we're saying that it's going to be longer, people still need to understand what they're aiming for. The next thing to talk about is medical suspension. So I've only ever done this once. And as far as I know, it's not something that is widely approved, if you like. But I think we have to have a serious conversation. If the person is fit to return to work, and we're choosing them not to be in work for a medical reason, then I don't understand why they don't get paid. If we are choosing for them not to be there. So, for example, we might be asking for them to get an additional piece of information, which isn't their fault. So maybe we fucked up and we haven't done the occupational health report and they drew back. Why is that their concern? So just think about that. That's the only time I've used it. I think I've heard of it once where a driver maybe was medically suspended because of they had an accident which was caused by a vehicle that we had, and they didn't have sickness entitlement, and so we felt like the right thing to do was to medically suspend them while they were off sick, so they could receive payment. At the end of the day, it wasn't his fault. He had the accident. The manager, the manager fucked up. So yeah. And the last point is that remember that your return to work's formal investigations process, if you like, when it goes to a disciplinary. So the quality should be treated as if an investigation meeting has taken place, and therefore again capturing every question and answer and making sure that you cover all the grounds around, what are they doing to facilitate, etc. So that ends the first podcast of season 2. I'll be honest, having had a break, I thought this was going to be a lot harder than it has been. So yeah, look, I hope you've got something out of it. I think I said right at the beginning as well that, I understand this is how I operate. It's in line with policies that I've worked with. And there's some things that, maybe you won't feel confident in trying to apply. I think for me, the key thing is about the duty of care piece when it comes to absence. I think hopefully that's transpired through. And I think a lot of it is about using fucking common sense. I think absence management is treated as a mundane task, a tick box exercise, etc., etc. And if you treat it like that, I think that is what gives you the wrong culture around absence. One of the things I've always had is a low absence rate. And I think the reason being is not because we wipe it under the carpet or anything like that, not at all. Is that we actually manage it in a transparent way. We give people the adult approach to say, what are you doing, etc. And then where we can, we support. And that's all I think the key to the success is. Like I say, I literally have at the moment just one long-term sick that we are managing that is a very acute condition. So therefore, it's completely new to all of us. But other than that, we've got through it. We've put actions in place. People are happy to come back. Sickness levels are going down because, I think they're more worried, more than the disciplinary and getting to the, final written stroke dismissal stage. I think they're more concerned about, okay, they're actually going to ask me what I'm doing. And that's what, for me, you want. People to be held accountable for their own actions and their own decisions. So yeah, look. Oh, I hit myself on the table. I hope you've enjoyed it. Very interested to hear what the feedback is. If things that aren't agreed with are agreed with, definitely want to hear that. And we'll catch you around on the next one. See you later.